Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to find the lore hidden in your Hearthstone deck. Well, it's been quite a while, hasn't it? That's mainly because I took on the challenge of NaNoWriMo. But basically you have to write 50,000 words in the month of November, and I decided to use that time writing for Lore of the Cards. I have an episode on Lillian Voss, and one about abominations coming your way too. I've also started on perhaps my biggest project to date, which I'm dubbing the Dragon Saga, the tale of all the dragon aspects. I'm around 30 pages deep now, and I've barely scratched the surface, so that's still very much a work in progress. My final Lore of the Cards I started writing during that time was this one, right here. I figured we've got some lengthy episodes coming your way, so a short one to start will get the ball rolling again as soon as possible. Plus, it's covering a card from the latest expansion, Kobolds and Catacombs, so this episode's actually relevant. Woo! Today we'll be looking at the first legendary minion revealed for the set, the Hunter's Kathrena Winterwisp. The art of the card is by Garrett Hanna. This Canadian artist has produced a lot of artworks for the game WildStar, and has made 7 collectible cards for Hearthstone and a handful of uncollectible ones too. Kathrena in World of Warcraft is a quest giver in the region of Darkshore. This Night Elven territory is currently the only region of Alliance controlled land in the continent of Kalimdor. Before the Sundering that split the single continent of Azeroth into the many pieces that litter the world now, Darkshore was one of the most prosperous regions of the Kel'Dorai kingdom. The cities of Ametharan and Bashalaran were constructed in the region that would become known as Darkshore, along the very edge of the Well of Eternity. The Night Elves believed their moon goddess Elune dwelt within the swirling arcane waters of the well. These waters would feed their development and their understanding of magic, able to tap into the well to amplify their powers. While many Night Elf villages were constructed along the rim of the well, Ametharan and Bashalaran were foremost among them, said to be favoured by the Night Elf Queen Ashara, her touch present in their construction. Servitors of Ashara from the highborn caste of Kel'Dorai society would settle in the two towns, and Athricus Narasin, one of Ashara's most loyal servants, would govern them. He watched over them both from the Tower of Athalax. Narasin's second, Asterion, a mage of great skill, dwelt among the people of Bashalaran. It would be he who listened to the citizens' concerns and then bring those to Narasin in his tower. During the Great Sundering caused by the well imploding as part of the aftermath of the Burning Legion's first invasion, the citizens of the two cities feared for their lives. In Ametharan, all was ruins, delirious citizens clinging to the ground as if it would somehow save them from the coming destruction. Athricus Narasin came to the aid of his people. He assured them he would cast a spell that would protect them. They would live for eternity and have nothing to fear from this world-shaking event. 10,000 years later, the ruins of these cities still remain in Darkshore, as did Athricus until the Cataclysm. Narasin had become a more malevolent figure, especially when compared to the saviour of old. He bound Asterion to the city of Bashalaran forever, the Night Elf remaining there even in death, and Narasin had allowed demonic forces to saturate the ruins. He would come to lead the cult of the Dark Strand, accepting membership from a number of races, including the demonically corrupted Night Elves, the Satyr. It would later be revealed that this organisation was associated to the Shadow Council, warlocks loyal to the Burning Legion. After the Sundering, many Night Elves settled in the northern reaches of Kalimdor, which included, and was not limited to, Ashenvale, Mount Hyjal, and Darkshore. While Hyjal and Ashenvale were centres of Night Elven activity in the area, there was still a useful port in the region of Darkshore. This would end up being abandoned during the course of the Third War, the residents of the port moving to Hyjal and Moonglade for safety. This was the Burning Legion's second invasion of Azeroth, which would again fail at the 11th hour. At the end of the war, some Night Elves would return to the port of Orbodyne. This remained the only centre of activity in the region, the rest of Darkshore cold and desolate. Orbodyne would ferry races of the Alliance, acting as a connection point between the great Night Elven tree Teldrassil and the body of the continent. Generally speaking, Darkshore is a land shunned by all, with any attempt to colonise the area, excluding Orbodyne, failing. Sadly, the populace of the port were considered misfits, looked down upon by the Night Elves residing in their capital, Darnassus. Even the druids and sentinels stationed at the port did their best to avoid the peculiar townsfolk. Orbodyne would not survive the Cataclysm, a world-shaking event much like the Sundering, only this time caused by the Black Dragon aspect Deathwing's re-entry into the physical realm from the elemental plane of Deepholm. The land under the port buckled and cracked, and as Deathwing flew over it, the docks were set ablaze by the fire that trailed the aspect. In the wake of the destruction wrought by Deathwing, the citizens of Orbodyne were resilient, founding the seaside settlement Lordanel. Whereas Darkshore is generally dull, Lordanel is a rare beacon, the plant life lush and vibrant. With no dock now, the residents are connected to Teldrassil via a flight path, one which many an adventurer have put to use. Worgen and Night Elf heroes are extremely likely to pass through this settlement as they adventure through the world, fulfilling quests from the residents. This means it is also likely they will find their journey lead them to the Grove of the Ancients. Once dull ruins, after the Cataclysm, like Lordanel, it is a rare location upon the shore in which plant life flourishes. This grove in southeastern Darkshore is the ruins of a sacred Night Elven temple and now acts as a meeting place for the Circle of Ancients. These tree folk have been involved with important decisions, such as aiding Fandrel's Staghelm grow the Night Elves' new world tree Teldrassil. Among the Ancients and others of her kind is Kathrena Winterwisp, a hunter hoping to heal the wounds that afflicted Darkshore. She has several quests for heroes to fulfill for her. The Night Elf's first concern was for a group of thistle bears living just south of where she was stationed. An entire generation of the majestic beasts have fallen ill. Winterwisp did not know about the gruesome malady affecting the bears, but knew it consumed them from within. Sadly, there was no way of saving these bears. They needed to be put down to save them from their misery, and so that their bodies might return to the earth. Kathrena also wanted heroes to try and find the source of the bear's terrible illness, and suggested it may be found in the shallow lake that the bears drank from. Their instructions given, the hero would travel to the thistle bear's territory. Putting them down, the hero then made their way to the lake. Within, they found an odd device, which must be causing the bear's debilitating condition. They told Winterwisp of this discovery, who winced to hear of the fate of the animals and the discovery of this device, wondering how the device had made its way to the lake. She observed that whatever was affecting the bears was devouring them physically and spiritually, something she expected satyrs or a particularly nasty disease to be responsible for. The device suggested another culprit, something unnatural. Winterwisp did not have the answers straight away for Darkshore's wildlife's predicament. Something was trying to devour it, and she would ask around to get an idea of what. In the meantime, she told the hero to gather materials for her so that she may protect the region's wildlife better. The hero was to get a seed of the earth from the ancient Onu, also residing in the Grove of the Ancients, a seed of the sky from one of the wisps of Darkshore that drifted amongst the trees, and a seed of the sea from one of the shells littering the coast to the west. Upon the hero's return, they handed the materials to Kathrena. She asked them if they enjoyed collecting them. She had particularly fond memories of chasing the wisps around Ashenvale in her youth. Joy danced across Kathrena's features as she became lost for a moment, remembering those times. As she came back to reality, Winterwisp's countenance darkened. She had found out what she and the hero were dealing with. Kathrena asked the hero if they were familiar with the old gods. gods, giant horrors that had once led a chaotic primordial Azeroth. The hunter had discussed the device with Onu, and they had come to the conclusion that it was the creation of one of their maddened followers. A dark instrument capable of stirring up terrors long thought dead in the lands of Darkshore. Kathrena's primary concern was for the beasts, flora and fauna of Darkshore. She handed the hero a Lifebringer sapling, created from the materials they had provided. She requested that they test the sapling on an unconsumed beast, either a bear, stag or moonstalker. When the sapling was used, it succeeded in protecting the animal from consumption, a shadowy figure being exposed that seemed to have begun a sickness that would soon take over the animal. Kathrena took this angry presence as a good sign. It sounded like whatever was behind the wildlife's issues wasn't happy, which meant they were on the right track. Knowing that her sapling protected the wildlife, Kathrena wanted to protect as many animals over as large a distance as possible as fast as she could. Winterwisp had spoken with the Flight Master Orseus not far from the Grove of the Ancients. Orseus agreed the use of one of his hippogriffs for Kathrena's mission. Both she and the hero would meet him. As Kathrena would need to focus on flying, she trusted her partner to be the one to protect Darkshore's wildlife from above. Grizzled thistlebears, moonstalkers and white-tailed deer would all be targets of the sapling's protective qualities. As the two flew through the air, Kathrena spoke with the hero, instructing them how to aid the animals and also sharing with them her knowledge of the area. While passing over the Wild Bend River, she mentioned that the white-tailed deer of Darkshore were repopulating that whole area. As they passed over the blazing strand, she told the hero to hold on tight to the hippogriff, as the warm air created by the fires could create a harsh updraft. As they travelled from the blazing strand into the Twilight Vale, she mentioned the Moonstalkers had been driven there by the strand's fires. They finally came to the bear population of the Vale. Kathrena thankful that the pair were not too late. The bears had not been consumed by any old god corruption. As the two went to return and give Orseus his hippogriff back, they passed over the Master's Glaive. Before the cataclysm, this giant adamantite blade skewered what looked like some sort of giant octopus-like creature. Since the near world-ending event, the upheaval in the lands of Darkshore seemed to have unearthed more of whatever this creature may be. These were the remains of the mighty Naraki and servant to the old gods Sagoth the Slitherer. It had taken 20 stone giants to defeat this mighty creature, only one surviving to thrust the Master's Glaive into Sagoth's skull. As millennia passed, this would become a holy site to the Night Elves. However, as Kathrena and her partner pervade the area, they noticed a host of people working to uncover more of the dead Naraki's petrified remains. They were members of the Twilight's Hammer, mortals that worshipped the old gods that sought the end of the world. Kathrena was confused as to why anyone would want to dig up anything as horrific as Sagoth's skeleton. She became convinced that those down below were responsible for what was affecting Darkshore's inhabitants. But upon landing, Kathrena did not send the hero to Sagoth's corpse, though the hero would eventually seek to disrupt and put an end to the Twilight's Hammer's operations. Winterwisp wanted to deal with the artifact that still lay at the bottom of the lake that had infected the bears the hero had had to euthanize. After making sure the animals were safe, this creation of an old god minion needed dealing with. Kathrena would thwart the old god artifact by using the life-giving energies of Darkshore itself. She once again handed the hero her Lifebringer sapling. This would act as a conduit with the energies, meaning when the hero waved it over the lake, it should prevent the artifact from working. She implored the hero to be careful. As they waved the sapling, a monstrosity appeared before them from within the artifact, Yothal the Devourer. This imposing Naraki assaulted the hero, but the adventurer was just about able to hold it off. They slew Yothal and destroyed the old god artifact. Kathrena was happy to see the hero return, though she was somewhat shocked by the state they were in. The battle with Yothal must have been a fierce one, as the hero was covered in what she described as chowder. She pondered Yothal's effect on the land. He was only a mere minion of the old gods. She dreaded to think what may become of Darkshore if the old gods themselves were still around trying to corrupt it. Either way, she was thankful the animals were safe. She was so happy she almost hugged the hero, though thought better of it given the adventurer's current chowdery state. Kathrena would later appear in the Warlords of Draenor expansion as well, able to become a follower of an Alliance commander in their garrison. When constructing their garrison to fight the might of the Iron Horde on an alternative reality's Draenor, where the orcs had not consumed the blood of Manoroth to become the demon's slaves, heroes could choose many different types of building to place in their base with different benefits. One of these for the Alliance heroes stationed in the perpetually dark Shadowmoon Valley was the Lunarfall Inn. This provided heroes with additional quests, travellers stopping by in their inn with tasks for them to complete in the dungeons of Draenor. This could also be used to recruit additional followers for their garrison. These brave adventurers were committed to the heroes' war effort on Draenor, venturing out across the world to retrieve supplies, gear, and other benefits for their garrison commander. Kathrena was one of the followers that could be recruited via the inn. She was classified as a survival hunter follower, and could learn several abilities to counter some of the difficulties she could face when out with other followers fulfilling missions for their garrison commander. She would not learn all of these, but was capable of learning Deterrence to counter the Massive Strike trait, Disengage to avoid danger zones, Freezing Trap to neutralise deadly minions, Multi-Shot to damage minion swarms, and Rapid Fire to deal with enemies when time was of the essence. Like all garrison followers, she could be found wandering around the garrison saying random lines if the garrison commander were to pass her. She would either tell the garrison commander something positive, how pretty Shadowmoon was, or that she was their biggest fan, or she would let them into a darker history. It seemed before she was recruited into the garrison, Winterwisp journeyed the harsh world of Draenor with another party. She would sometimes tell the commander, "I'm glad to be here. My last party was... I think they're dead." She would also compliment the commander on how much nicer their garrison was when compared to Admiral Taylor's. Taylor was a respected admiral of the Alliance campaigns against Deathwing and upon the lands of Pandaria. Heroes would see his garrison firsthand when they travelled to the spires of Iraq. Only ghosts now wandered the garrison, Taylor having been betrayed from within. Is this how Winterwisp lost her party? One of the only people to survive the necromancer Ethiel's betrayal? Or had this tragedy struck after the optimistic hunter had already passed through? It is thought that Kathrena Winterwisp's inclusion within WoW is a reference to the webcomics Flintlock's Guide to Azeroth and Flintlock vs. the Horde. Both these comics were created by Dave Fargo Cossack, who now works for Blizzard as lead narrative designer for World of Warcraft. Flintlock is the main character in these humorous short strips, a warrior that claims to be a hunter. Kathrena is one of many other characters to crop up frequently along Flintlock's adventures. She first appeared after the first 2 episodes of comics, each episode consisting of several parts, in the Series Begins collection. The unnamed Kathrena stands next to Flintlock in Part 1, looking over an escort mission's details while their charge is devoured by spiders. In fairness, Flintlock does point out the mission didn't specifically say their charge not to be killed by giant spiders. She is also around in Part 4, again questing alongside Flintlock. The dwarf mentions feeling bad at first about killing turtles, but he soon got over that after they refused to drop the loot he needed. Kathrena then ventures to ask how many more of the items he needs, only to find the dwarf is now killing the turtles for fun, and finished the quest ages ago. Kathrena would be introduced by name in episode 3 of Flintlock's Guide to Azeroth, Lego My Ogre. In this episode, Flintlock gathers a party to fight the ogre Choksul. Kathrena becomes the party's hunter along with her faithful companion, the spider Itsy Bitsy. The spider crawls over Flintlock. The dwarf assumes trying to get at the food in his backpack. Kathrena dismisses this as nonsense, as Itsy Bitsy is actually trying to eat the dwarf's face. With his party gathered, Kathrena, Schweitzer the priest, and Bloodrose the mage, Flintlock leads them to Choksul's domain. He tells the party that to kill an ogre, one needs to properly plan, which Kathrena suggests he possibly overdid holding on to this quest for 2 months, to which Flintlock replies, "I was planning." Having no time for Flintlock's planning, Bloodrose rushes ahead, not even leaving any ogres for poor little Itsy Bitsy to kill. Just before fighting Chok-Sul and his gang, Bloodrose stops and reels off instructions to the rest of the group that they barely understand. They beat the ogre, Kathrena slowing him with her concussive shot. Flintlock slightly overdoing the killing blow with a grenade when the ogre was nearly dead. Where would their quests lead next? Luckily, the ogre had a letter on his person which mentioned the world's most powerful goblin-engineered weapon. Before the start of the next episode in a small random adventure series, Kathrena got herself a new giant raptor pet and looked over the letter Flintlock had discovered. She didn't feel it was genuine as the information on the goblin device was written in crayon. Flintlock would instantly correct her. Ancient crayon. During the Love is in the Air festivities, Flintlock purchased a box of chocolates from a goblin salesman and gifted them to Kathrena. Well, I say during the festivities, they were actually a day late. The box of chocolates was also empty, Flintlock getting them for a reduced price as the goblins had eaten all the caramels, and the rest he'd thrown behind him to distract wild boars that were chasing him. When Kathrena mentioned it was poor form to present a lady with an empty box of chocolates a day late, Flintlock said it was a blessing in disguise as the night elf was getting a bit thick in the bum anyway. A slight which Kathrena killed Flintlock for. Luckily, death in WoW is not permanent, so the two were adventuring together again before they knew it. Flintlock would later take his goblin letter to Tinkmaster Overspark, who would confirm it to be genuine. He could tell this as it was charred, almost illegible, and spattered with blood. The Tinkmaster admitted a lack of expertise to unravel the letter though, and suggested they see a goblin engineer, but the one he knew resided deep in Horde territory. The members of the party would need a mount each to travel to the engineer, something Kathrena had been saving for some time. Flintlock, however, was not in Ironforge's good books after a chicken bomb incident, so was charged more. He said not to worry though, as he'd experimented with several mounts. Yeah. After some planning in an inn and a long journey, the party made their way to the edge of Horde territory. The party came across a single Furbolg, which could alert the rest of his tribe should he spot the party. Flintlock decided to use what he called the Chuck Shot. Cramming heavy blasting powder and a woodchuck down the end of a blunderbuss, Flintlock shot the Furbolg, the woodchuck protruding out of the dead Furbolg's eye. Being a night elf and in tune with nature, Kathrena unsurprisingly took umbrage with this method. An argument broke out between the two, with the others trying to remind them that they were at the edge of Horde territory. Unfortunately, Flintlock's mount, a bot running on scripts and macros called Loping, would kill an orc scout, flagging them all for PvP. During their time PvP flagged, Flintlock murdered an innocent noob who was just trying to learn about bags in WoW. This caused further tensions in the party, Bloodrose frustrated by the prolonged PvP flag. Kathrena exacerbated the issue, saying next time the Horde attacked, Flintlock would likely use another poor defenseless animal to kill them. The argument became so heated the party went their separate ways, not wanting to quest together anymore. The party would eventually rejoin, but not intentionally. Bloodrose and Kathrena would aid Flintlock against a Tauren. They didn't know they were saving the dwarf, just saw an opportunity for a quick honour point. While split, Schweitzer had been tailing the Tauren, Bloodrose had levelled up to 60, and Kathrena had had a relationship with a tree? Something tells me this comic is definitely canonic to Kathrena Winterwisp's lore. They would eventually make their way out of Ashenvale Forest and into the Barrens. By this time, the Tauren had resurrected and told other Horde of the Alliance in their territory. The Horde organised a raid to hunt and kill the Alliance party. The Horde didn't find them and the party were able to make their way to the Goblin city of Gadgetzan. They would split, trying to find a goblin to help them understand the engineering weapon letter. Kathrena was tasked with visiting the local merchants. A frustrating experience as one money-grubbing goblin tried to sell her leg armour as a headpiece, since the stats were so good. After days of searching around Gadgetzan, they eventually found out the goblin they were looking for, Fluxcrank, was hiding in a cave just north of the troll ruins outside of town. Before they could leave though, the Horde raid caught up with the party and surrounded Gadgetzan. The party managed to sneak out by crawling up inside Flintlock's new mount, an undead ram that he bought dead and forced Schweitzer to resurrect, despite its vital organs not being intact. The party arrived at the cave Fluxcrank was allegedly inside, but it was guarded. The Guardian screamed how he came into being, telling the story of an imaginary conflict between Manaroth and Alexstrasza that raged for 7 days and nights. Wherever droplets of Manaroth's blood fell, the very earth boiled and brought life to his kind. The Guardians, rage made flesh, born of malice and stone. This Guardian was now the last of his kind, called upon to protect the secrets of the ultimate goblin weapon. If anyone wanted to learn them, they would need to pass through the Guardian, who had lived for an aeon and wielded the power of heaven and earth. He called for those he knew were there to come out and show themselves, something Flintlock and his friends weren't too keen to do, a hang up the macro bot gnome didn't have. In a panic, the party debated whether to save the gnome. Luckily for them, rogues were totally overpowered and Loping beat the Guardian with ease. They journeyed deep into the cave only to find something had gone terribly wrong. Fluxcrank lay on the floor, his quest completion question mark buried into his head. Flintlock had taken so long to fulfill the quest, the question mark had fallen and killed the goblin. After looting the goblin to give his clothes to Loping, who'd lost his while in Gadgetzan, Schweitzer read through his journal. Kathrena tried looking through Fluxcrank's diary to get an idea of where to go next, but all she came across was some disturbing stains. Schweitzer's search was far more fruitful, discovering that anyone that had been involved with the devastating goblin weapon had met with an unfortunate end. Gub Gearshift, the lead engineer, had had his body so badly mangled his funeral was a closed casket. When transporting the weapon, those that watched it didn't realise that they had been dragging the corpse of the ordnance officer Bane from Goldshire to Booty Bay, and the weapon's eccentric financier, Ulysses R. Pierpont, had his groin go through, well, not a very pleasant process. Schweitzer suggested these and Fluxcrank's death may well be murders. After further studying the journal, Schweitzer suggested Bane's grave may hold the key. The ordnance officer was secretive and paranoid, having his maps buried with him. Kathrena took umbrage with desecrating the dead's graves, but Flintlock certainly didn't. They would need to travel to the Scarlet Monastery to retrieve the corpse. Along the way, they celebrated Thanksgiving with a vegetarian meal prepared by Kathrena. Though Flintlock preferred turkey, Kathrena objected to the ritual killing of turkeys. Arriving at the monastery, the party would ambush 3 acolytes heading toward it. They would use their garments as disguises to infiltrate the Scarlet Crusade's base. Naturally, a few alterations needed to be made to Kathrena, Bloodrose and Flintlock, as they were not human like all the members of the Scarlet Crusade. These strong disguises allowed them to pass the guards out front of the monastery. Eventually, they make their way to the graveyard and dig up Bane's body. Upon the dead's person was a map showing the last known location of the superweapon, but at that time, members of the Scarlet Crusade arrived and accused them of trying to raise the dead. A struggle broke out. The party were able to best the Scarlet Crusade. When they left the monastery, they found the acolytes had escaped and put on their clothes, which Flintlock and his friends made them instantly give back. When the party had time to consult the map, they found out the ultimate goblin weapon was buried beneath a Rathi Basin, an area where the Alliance and Horde constantly vied for supremacy. After queuing for the battleground for a long time, they finally entered. Bloodrose got straight to work organising the Alliance forces. Bloodrose would continue to lead the Alliance even after they captured the blacksmith where the weapon was located. This left Flintlock, Kathrena and Schweitzer to search the smith. While Kathrena and Schweitzer elected to be more subtle, trying to find where a secret passage may be by tapping every brick, examining every mortar joint and leaving no stone unturned, Flintlock preferred to search using explosives. After reducing the blacksmith to rubble, Flintlock found, well, made a secret tunnel. This led to a large cavernous vault beneath the earth, where the final guardian of the weapon lived. A tiny Tauren druid, which was more of an annoyance than anything else. With the Taurens still latching on to Flintlock, they discovered the ultimate goblin weapon. A giant bomb with guns strapped to it and landmines stuck on. Having seen the weapon, Schweitzer edited his theory that the weapon's creators were murdered. They were just idiots. With the weapon in their possession, the team ventured on, not quite sure what they were going to do with the bomb. Flintlock had a few ideas: save and or destroy the world. They would come across a mighty adversary though. While it was a giant tree, Flintlock didn't see it and was pulverised into the dirt. Kathrena immediately recognised it as one of the ever-blooming. She would fill them in on what it was. 9,000 years ago, Alexstrasza planted a single acorn in the Well of Eternity, which would become Nordrassil, the World Tree. During the spring of Nordrassil's first fruiting, it would drop 12 enchanted acorns that would become the ever-blooming, mighty guardians with an eternal bond with nature. When Nordrassil had to give its all to aid in the defeat of the Burning Legion at the end of the Third War, the ever-blooming that survived became feral. Faced with this mighty foe, Schweitzer yelled to Flintlock that he needed to use the goblin weapon. Kathrena objected. While the tree was feral, it was a part of nature, and Flintlock agreed. However, he had somewhat different reasoning. He thought it would be a waste on a single tree. It should be used on the whole forest, if anything, and only then when it was dry for maximum spread. Kathrena was not happy with the dwarf's reasoning. Kathrena told the party there was no way the adventurers could hope to defeat the ever-blooming. It was nature incarnate. No mortal magic or weapon could harm it. Flintlock would use one of his greatest weapons to defeat it: a beaver on a stick. Kathrena objected to this method, so Flintlock described other ways he could use beavers as weapons, something the hunter found so repugnant she went into a coma. While she was motionless, the dwarf killed the ever-blooming. Upon waking, Kathrena told her friends they better not have killed the ever-blooming. They lied, saying it left after giving them a hug. That's why they were covered in sap. The tree even gave them a gift to give to the Night Elf. Assuming it was a wooden sculpture, the Night Elf was overjoyed until the dwarf said he thought it may be the tree's prostate. Finally arriving back in civilization, they could show off their prize, which people thought was pretty stupid. Just then, Kathrena saw something crawling over the hill, a patrol guard riddled with arrows. The guard had come from the area surrounding the human capital of Stormwind, where a massive horde raid was poised to attack the capital. The same horde group, led by the Tauren, Flintlock and his allies, killed. Still annoyed. The heroes would use the goblin weapon to defeat the horde, but not before buying some new gear first. This is when Kathrena starts to look a bit more like her WoW counterpart, immune to the horde because she is too, and I quote, hot to kill, too sexy to die. This leaf armor was made from the ever-blooming. When her friends pointed out that this was a bit hypocritical of her, she said the leaves were going towards the greater good of making her look hot. Seems fair, to be honest. The group would hijack a goblin zeppelin to ferry them to Stormwind. During their travel, Loping's player actually returned to his keyboard. He was a lawyer that had downloaded several Chinese scripting and macro packs to play the game for him while AFK. Loping was not his only character, all of them earning him money for use in the real world. He was able to tell the party where the best place would be to drop the goblin weapon. The Guide to Azeroth series ended with the horde attacking Stormwind and the bomb being dropped, defeating the horde but also leaving Stormwind in tatters. The Flintlock vs the Horde webcomic starts by following the adventures of the orc Roktar. When he and his father Garotar arrive in Razor Hill, they are ganked by Flintlock and his party, Kathrena firing the first shot into Garotar's throat. His father killed, Roktar is left to mourn his death and swears revenge on those that did this. The orc goes in search of an animal companion to help him exact his vengeance. His two allies accidentally kill two of his intended pets, and the third, a boar, is killed by Flintlock, who then proceeds to shoot the boar out of a cannon at other boars, further enraging Roktar. In the end, the orc had to resort to a bunny for a pet. While the orc's journey took him to the Barrens, Flintlock and co remained in Durotar, constantly murdering Garrotar, hoping to get sweet loot from the constantly spawning NPC. It didn't drop, though Flintlock thought he was Kel'Thuzad, having bought a shoddy guide on eBay. In a bid to find an owl for a pet, Roktar sneaks into the Night Elf's home, Teldrassil. Eventually, he is spotted. Throwing his trusty rabbit at the Night Elf that saw him, Roktar makes his escape. The elf, however, brags of his survival, making the orc sound much stronger than he actually was. Word of the attack spreads and attracts the attention of Flintlock. Arriving with a massive cannon, Flintlock is greeted by Kathrena. She told him there was only one attacker that likely escaped already, meaning with a heavy heart, Flintlock had to pack up his cannon. Later, Roktar and his friends travel to the Stone Talon Mountains, as he has a quest to hand in there. Upon completion of the quest, the troll Malaka Boom would give the orc the Spike Hammer, the most powerful bow a hunter of his skill could obtain. Well, if you don't do math. Roktar was about to get his bow, the process being slightly delayed by Malaka Boom correcting the orc on the pronunciation of his name, when in came Flintlock, decapitating the troll, proclaiming, "Die, Illidan!" Clearly his eBay bought player's guide had steered him wrong again. Highly embarrassed, Kathrena pointed out that this was another mid-range horde NPC, not the mighty raid boss Flintlock had intended to defeat. At least this NPC had some loot though. Flintlock picked up the Spike Hammer. The bow being useless to his class, he snapped it in half out of frustration. This frustrated Kathrena as she was a hunter, but Flintlock didn't even check to see if she could use it. Roktar was obviously not very happy either. Picking up the two pieces of the bow, Flintlock apologised to Kathrena. The elf was not impressed, as what was she going to do with a bow broken in half? Flintlock suggested to dual wield the two halves. This was the last straw for Roktar. He went away, trained and bought epic loots from the auction house with help from his friend, the Shadow Priest. With his friends in tow, Roktar tracked down Flintlock and his party, but he did not simply wish to fight. After all, it was 5 of them versus 4 of his friends. They would watch and observe as Bloodrose was giving her party a talking down to. They'd recently been in a fight. She was mad Flintlock didn't hold aggro, that Kathrena's pet wasn't assisting the main tank, and Loping and Schweitzer were looting during combat. Roktar observed and gave his assessment of who to kidnap first. Not Flintlock or Bloodrose. They were clearly the minions, as they argued all the time. He thought Loping was the leader, looking over his underlings with complete calm and authority, clearly the brains of the operation. But Roktar did not want to capture the leader. That would rally and unify his followers to decisive action. They needed to capture the heart of their party, the most valued member, which would leave them demoralized. He concluded that was Schweitzer. The leader and he did all the looting, claiming the rewards. He also stood out of combat, which Roktar presumed was so that he could bark orders, not that he was a complete coward. The kidnapping and following beatdown of Schweitzer was pretty simple. Flintlock asked what the next quest in the chain was, to which the priest replied, "Ah! Help me! Something's got me! Oh no! It's the Horde! The Horde has me! There's 4 of them! Ah! Help! Help!" To which Flintlock said, "I don't have that one, can you share it?" The orc and his party headed all the way to Outland with their prisoner to set up an ambush for the rest of the Alliance scum. However, by the time they had completed setting up their ambush, Convinced the Alliance would be beside themselves from the loss of their healer, Kathrena only just noticed that Schweitzer was missing. 2 weeks would pass before Flintlock actually paid attention to the fact Kathrena had noticed their priest was missing. It was then that they travelled to Outland to save their friend. After journeying the world for some time, Flintlock spotted what looked like a horde encampment. Happy they finally found the encampment, Bloodrose stopped to drink. But Flintlock and the others went charging off without her. While Bloodrose drank, the Shadow Priest struck. Kathrena was taken out by the troll shaman Gravy, who, to put it as blunt as possible, was tripping balls, hallucinating he was Abraham Lincoln enjoying a taco. You know, like we all do. Despite the fact Kathrena shot him 4 times in the head, and Gravy was hallucinating he was being attacked by 3 shares, with guidance from his totems that were somehow talking to him, sheer luck, and his far superior gear, Gravy defeated the Night Elf. The ghosts of Bloodrose and Kathrena would visit the priest to try and get him to help in the battle, for once. He had had macros and his talents specced by the greatest PvP player on the server, the Wolf. He had even macroed a murder button for Schweitzer, but he never used it because he feared the button. The murder button worked a treat on the Shadow Priest when he returned. Elsewhere, Flintlock was able to defeat Gravy with low ping, but the gnome came out of the battle with only 1 hit point, which was nibbled away by a rabbit. Sherry, the Horde party's warlock, and a real girl, then came to where Schweitzer was held. In real life, she was a ham model and had recently done some more risque modelling work, which she wanted to show the priest as he seemed nice. She even wanted to trade numbers. However, as Alliance and Horde speak different languages, he couldn't understand her and melted her face. Enraged, Flintlock followed the rabbit through the forest looking to kill it. He came face to face with Roktar. The rabbit was his trusted companion. Schweitzer arrived just in time. A warrior and a priest versus a hunter and a rabbit, they couldn't lose. But somehow they did. Roktar standing victorious. So, there you have it, the lore and origins of Kathrena Winterwisp, which I thought was going to be a short episode. Proves how freaking wrong I was. Didn't know there was a whole freaking webcomic connected to her when I started, which I've linked in the description below. It's far more humorous than a serious episode on lore lets on, so I recommend it, especially for any WoW players among you. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications to be informed whenever I do a video. Focus on the channel now is going to be on quality, so videos may not be all that regular, but if you miss the sound of my voice described as nerdy, nasally, like I have a cold, or buttery, soothing and hot, pick your set of adjectives. You can come watch my streams on Twitch, which will now be happening every Friday. Obviously I'm British, so it may be harder for others to catch it, but they'll start at 10 PM GMT. I'll be playing WoW on my death night that people voted for me to play ages ago. If you do miss them, I will be uploading stream summaries as well, not just clips, but trying to write it like a lore of the cards. Like some sort of highlight fan fiction hybrid. I'll try it first to put a bit of humour in, but if people don't like it, I won't break my back over making them. Either way, thank you all so much for watching. Really hope you enjoy this expansion as a whole. I'm gonna be dungeon running my brains out. That looks very fun. Until next time, happy Hearthstoning.